So my client's results for the Illinois agility test then. So the client's score was average. He scored 18.2 seconds, 18.02 seconds for the Illinois agility test. And if you look at the graph in the top left, whilst the borders are very close together, the client is actually in correlation with average. If you look at the table on the right, this is shown more clearly as average is between 16.2 and 18.10. So the client score sits neatly in average for males. Agility is needed to weave in between and dodge the opposition when you're playing rugby, especially as an outside centre, as your main purpose is to make those darting runs down the wing and score tries. Therefore, an average score in this test is not a bad thing, but it can always be improved, as it will improve his agility in the game and mean that he's performing better in the game. So in terms of recommendations, like I said, it will all correlate with circuit training that I will speak about in more detail at the end. But specifically to agility, I will get the participant to actually run through the Illinois agility test again as a station. I'll get them to run through it twice, I think, as one station. And obviously this will be repeated because circuits are repeated. This will not only increase familiarity with the agility test, meaning that they will get a higher score, but it should also increase general agility for use in the game. Standing broad jump. So the client's score for this was actually below average. He got a score of 2.1, and as you can see, that sits in average because he is over 16. So below average is between 2.15 and 1.98 meters, and he got 2.1, so sits in that below average category. Now, as an outside centre, he needs power in his legs to drive forward, propel himself forward in sprints, and also in the case where he might have to tackle someone. He needs power in his legs to surge forward and make that tackle. So, obviously, standing broad jump, his score being below average is a weakness that would require adjustments to improve that and would be a focal point alongside his speed, his sprint score. Again, the recommendations for him will be in the circuit later mentioned, but specifically here I would actually get him to do some box jumps on a plyo box, 2-footed jumps, and that would be a station in itself. But obviously that high intensity interval training that I previously mentioned for the sprint would also help with this, and also help with his power, as it's increasing his anaerobic endurance and his anaerobic power. For the hand grip dynamometer test, the client's score was average here. He got a score of 49.2 kilograms, which, as you can see, puts him in the average category in comparison to normative data, as average is between 45 and 50 kg. The client needs strength to endure attempted tackles from opposition to stay up on his feet, and also in a scrum to stay upright and push forward. And also, like previously mentioned, he needs it to kind of barge off players if they try and tackle him. So obviously an average score, again, means that it probably wouldn't be a focal point for training, as the below average scores would be more of a concern. So whilst this isn't a main concern, again, any improvements would correlate with a better performance, which is what the client wants, as they want to go professional. So the recommendations I'd make will be discussed in that circuit at the end, but specifically I would relate it to press ups for 1 minute at a station on its own, as it would improve pectoral strength, tricep strength, general strength in the arms, which is always going to improve the endurance of tackles and his general performance as an outside centre. So in terms of the 1 minute sit up test, as you can see, the client's score is average and nearing on good, actually. So as he's you've got normative data here for 18 to 25-year-olds. He's nearing to 18, he's 17. So actually these might be higher expectations than what he should be aiming for. But in correlation to this normative data, you can see that he would be in the average category, as it is 35 to 38 kilograms. He's very nearing on above average, which is really good. It's probably the least concern so far. So obviously where the client would need muscular endurance in abdominals is when he has that kind of repetitive contraction of those abdominal muscles, when he twists and turns to change direction quickly with that agility that he also requires. In addition to this, just regular respiratory function and any sort of movement generally always involves abdominals, as it's your core and keeps you balanced, keeps you upright. So I feel that muscular endurance in abdominals is very important, which is why I'm very happy with his score, as it nears above average. But again, as it is average, there's always room for improvement. So yeah, I'd like him to participate in a circuit that I'm about to go into detail about, but specifically for the sit-up test, I would make him do sit-ups for a period of time as a station, as it would not only replicate the movements that would be tested, making him more familiar with it, but it would also increase that abdominal strength, as you're creating tears on the abdominals, which would later be repaired, increasing the strength of it. So if we look into more detail for the recommendations then for the Illinois agility test, the standing broad jump, the hand grip dynamometer, and the sit-up test, to improve all of these, I'd actually like to compile or compress them into one form of training, as it means that all of those areas can be covered in one session and they can all be improved in that one session. Obviously, this session would be repeated for a period of time, perhaps a 6-week period. So what this circuit training would consist of is 4 stations, one for each of those components of fitness. So station 1 would be a full run through of the Illinois agility test 2 times over. This wouldn't be a rest in between. This would be running through the Illinois agility test, then running back to the start and doing it through again. So this would be twice at that first station. Once you stop that, you can have a 1 minute rest and you move on to station 2. This is where the standing broad jump comes into play. So obviously standing broad jump involves power and improves power. So I would actually get the client to do box jumps onto a plyo box, which should be a 2 feet takeoff, as then you're focusing on both legs, both power in both legs, and I'd like you to continuously do those box jumps for 1 minute. Obviously, because we're focusing on power here instead of muscular endurance for this station, I think it would be best to take it at a slower pace, at a kind of lower intensity, lower regularity. I wouldn't want you to keep doing them fast. So perhaps do them, aim for at least, I'd say 15 to 20 would be an aim for how many are done. For station 3, this would be focused on strength in the arms. So this would be simply press-ups for 1 minute straight. This will not only improve strength in the arms, but also muscular endurance, so it would be helping other factors as well, which is why I feel that circuit training is the best form of training for my client, because there are so many areas that need to be focused on in team sports. So obviously doing these press-ups, that's going to improve the strength of pectorals, triceps, deltoid. All of the muscles in the arm are going to strengthen. For last station, I'd like the client to do sit-ups for 1 minute. That's obviously focusing on muscular endurance. So the more they can do, the better, really. It's almost like repeating that 1 minute sit-up test. So each station would be done through, and then after you finish those stations, you'd repeat it, the whole circuit again, so that you'd end up repeating the circuit 3 times through. You don't want to overwork yourself too hard, especially if you're working in correlation with the other recommendations that I made. So that's the high intensity interval training and the continuous training. So as we've already taken up, I've already recommended you do training on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You don't want the training days to be too close together, because you're going to be working yourself too hard and risking DOMS or extreme fatigue the next day, and you'd really feel the effects of it. So you want to spread training out a bit and have rest days between. However, 2 days next to each other is not too bad. I perhaps put the circuit training closer to the continuous training. So I would perhaps put circuit training on a Sunday, maybe. If you look at recommendations overall then, so you've got the continuous training on a Monday and a Wednesday, the HIIT training on a Friday, and that circuit training on a Sunday. So that circuit training would only be once a week as well, because you don't want to overwork yourself. Overall, if you were to train using each of my recommendations, all of them in correlation with each other, then the client should see improvements in all aspects of fitness that they feel they have an importance in their sport. Obviously, looking back on the results, sit-up test is average, as was hand grip dynamometer. So they weren't as much of a concern as the standing broad jump, which was below average. Illinois agility test was average. Sprint was poor, so that's a big focal point as well. And the yo-yo test was average. So from that you can see that perhaps the sprint and the standing broad jump were points of focus. Therefore, if you wanted to train without all of those recommendations, I'd focus on those.